Joe Snyder.
Hi, Joe.
And this is Lee, and someone next to Lee. Lee Wellman, they're real people with two names too. And we're all Quakers of one ilk or another. And so we wanted to share a little bit of our tradition. Much of Friends worship and practice, well, Quakers are also called Friends, those who are not familiar with the lingo. Most of Friends practice in worship comes out of silence. And I also should say, I know this is an interfaith community. We come from a Christian tradition, and I will use some of that language. It is by no means meant to be exclusive or exclusive to anybody. We're all in this together. We take very seriously Jesus' statement that wherever two or three are gathered together in his name, there he is amongst us. And so if that's the case, we should be listening. So we spend a lot of time trying to listen and discern what God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit has in store, has in mind for us to be doing. And we're going to offer maybe a little opportunity to practice that tonight. Also, the other little incident I wanted to just mention is, because I just got my eyes open, it's the Transfiguration, which people, Christians who read the New Testament all know about, which is a very weird piece of business on top of the mountain where Jesus turns all brilliantly white and talks to Moses and Elijah. And Peter gets all excited and says, "Oh, we got to build something. We got to build some booths here." At which point the cloud envelops them and the voice says, "Listen to it." The point being, this is not about building stuff. It's about listening. And it's not about building institutions, it's about building citizens, it's about building practices, it's about listening. And so that's what we try to do. We don't always do it perfectly, but we try. In doing readings, this talk about building deep relationships in a busy world drew me right into this story, which I'll now tell you. I have to precede the story by telling you that in first century Palestine, a woman who was menstruating was dirty and would contaminate anybody or anything that touched her. And the woman in the story has been menstruating without stop for 20 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so as this story begins, Jesus has just come across the lake in the boat and landed presumably at Capernaum. And immediately the word has gone out. He's back! He's back! And the crowd strikes together. And if you've ever been in a small town, you know how this works. But through this crowd comes a man named Jairus, who is the most important guy in town. He's the jefe, he's the head honcho of the synagogue. And he comes running up to Jesus, everybody's gathering, and says, "Help, my little girl is dying. I need you to come." And Jesus sets out across the town to Jairus' house. But this throng of people starts coming around him, and it's slow going, because everybody's crowding around. And all of a sudden, in the middle of this, he stops. And he says, "Somebody touch me." He looks around. Peter's saying, "Come on, Jesus, we gotta go." "What do you mean somebody touched you? There's 150 people in this crowd. You say somebody touched you?" Jesus says, "Somebody touched me. I felt power go out of me. Somebody touched me." He looks around and he finds this woman. He also looks at him. And he engages in a conversation with her. And draws out from her this whole long story of how she has suffered from this condition, been ostracized, been a pariah for 20 years, not to mention sicker than a dog probably, and that she had touched him in order to be healed. And at the moment she touched him, she felt healed. Meanwhile, the kid is dying. It's important. Jesus spends 15, 20 minutes. How long does it take to coax a story out of his womb and bless her? And then go home? I think that's what we're being asked to do by this reading that we've had. So with that as introduction, I want to introduce you to a Quaker practice called worship sharing. And it would take us about an hour and a half to do this properly. But we're going to just do an introduction. The other thing that Quakers do, besides spend a lot of time in silence, is they use questions. We have, instead of doctrines, we have questions. And which we refer to by the ancient name of queries. So in worship sharing, we gather in silence, and then we have a query. And then the people assembled are asked to respond to the query out of the silence. And the responses are to be from one's own personal experience. Not from a book we've read, not from a movie we've seen, not from a philosophical idea that we're wrapped up in, but from our own personal experience of the divine within us and in the world. We take time between responses, minutes, not seconds, and we allow that response to settle into the room and be absorbed. We try, there's a new phrase that's going around, we try to listen in tongues. Listen to the Holy Spirit speaking through the person who is sharing, rather than letting trigger words that the person might use get us running off on tangents. We try to listen to what's behind the words, what's coming through the words. Needless to say, things that are spoken in worship sharing are confidential, will have to be shared without permission. Anything out important?
You don't respond.
Yeah, thank you. And in worship sharing, it's not a conversation. So we share what is coming from us, and we don't say, oh, I agree with you, or oh, I don't agree with you. We just share our experiences and let that sound. So, in what little time we have left, we're going to take some time to just be silent and get centered. And I will read this query I have here. And I'll ask you to give it another good chunk of silence. And then whoever feels moved to share from his or her personal experience about this query, feel free. And we'll close it. What do you say? 7? All right. I need to share.
I just wanted to add the be brief part.
The what?
The be brief part.
Oh, the be brief. Yes. Yeah, no sermons, please. All right, so let us settle into silence. building deep relationships takes time, and opportunities do not always arrive in a scheduled way. How do I make time for such relationships to develop in our busy, highly scheduled world?
Question reminded me that what I have a designated space for, I'm more likely to make time for. And in my case, I have a designated space in my backyard in the yurt. That's a space for meditation and for these kind of one-to-one, more intimate conversations. And so the space reminds me of what I know is important and what I want to
and to make myself discovered her incredibly profound, deep courage and spirituality to go beyond my assumption. The man I just met on a trip was a top executive at Dow Chemical. 49 years a Methodist church teacher. So much for my assumptions. Such goodness. So easy to assume isn't there.
This Sunday, I was walking to Quaker meeting for worship, and I was half an hour late for an hour-long meeting, and I ran into a skateboarder who was trying to figure out what was going on with a puppy that had been running around on the sidewalk and trying to figure out where the puppy lived. And so, although I was quite late, I had no doubts about stopping to help the puppy find its way home, because obviously that was what I was meant to do that morning. So I was 45 minutes late instead of half an hour late. And if I had that much trust about all of my appointments and ideas about what I ought to be doing from day to day, then it would be easier to respond to the needs of relationships as they arise.
During my loving kindness meditations, I follow a guide that suggests bringing to mind a person which I have a difficult time with. And so when I bring to mind, each time I do the loving kindness meditation, one or another person, I find that when that person is in my midst, in a future moment, I see them in a different way after having done the loving kindness meditation.
Thank you, friends. We might draw a meeting like this to a close with the words, "Are all hearts clear?" We clearly haven't had time for that to happen. We are under the constraint of the schedule, so thank you. And I have just a tiny bit to add, which there's another dimension of that story I'm told, which really bears on what we're doing as organizers here, which is the gods with Jesus. What's going on in their heads? If we get to his house and do something for him, he's the head of the honcho of the temple. How much credence more will our movement have if that happens? Come on, Jesus! If we go to him and we please him, there'll be a few drachmas in the bag for us. That'll help the movement. Get going, Jesus!